Hello friends, today I'm going to show you how to make a fabric tassel. This will be a step-by-step tutorial. Now the first thing you're going to want to do is, if you have a book or journal in mind that you'd like to make your tassel for, you're going to want to grab, and we'll get to how we get to those strips of fabric, but just bear with me. You're going to want to measure your fabric to your book or your journal. So you can, I'm not making this for this book, but I am using this for an example. So you can see that this is a great length if I want a long tassel. So I'm going to go with this as my length. And not that you need me to measure it, but I would say this is about 14 inches long. Now this would be a very long tassel. But just remember that if you only measure the length of your journal or book, then you're going to have a tiny tassel. You have to measure and then double. If I wanted my tassel to only be this long, I would measure and double. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense for step one. And I wanted to mention real quick that that book, that Edith Holden book, was given to me by my friend, Recrafted by Carol. And I haven't had the heart to tear into it yet, but I will someday. To get your fabric strips, you're going to want to grab a piece of fabric, and I like to snip about 1 inch to 1.5 inches, but probably closer to 1 inch. And then I will take that fabric and I will tear it. I do prefer to tear it, it's faster, and it leaves a little bit of a fluffy edge to it. So my friends, if you're using fabric, then you want to tear all of your pieces. And you can use a variety of fabrics if you want. I like using fabric because they fluff up the tassel. I like a fluffy tassel, not a stringy tassel, personally. But sometimes a stringy tassel does have its place, so I'm not always completely opposed to them. So then when you're making your tassel this way, I like to do a little crisscross. That's just my preference. You don't have to. You could literally lay everything over each other. But I do a little bit of crisscross because it seems to mesh the different fibers so that when you pull this in half, I don't know, you just see more of them. That's how I feel anyway. But you do it however you like. So I've grabbed my fabric that I tore, and I've grabbed some seam binding. This is the wonderful thing about tassels. You can put just about anything you'd like into them. So I'm just going to do my little crisscrossing and my layering. I also grabbed some satin ribbon. That's always nice to add into our tassels, especially the super fine. It adds a little bit of color, but the super fine is hard to use in our junk journaling, I find. It's too skinny to like be able to glue down comfortably. So using it in a tassel, I feel like, is a nice idea. Also, other materials that you can use in your tassels is yarn. Yarn is a nice splash of color. It's a wonderful texture. It mixes things up for you. So that's always a good one. So I'm going to put this in fast motion as I just build my layers. And you can watch and you can craft along if you'd like. Okay, once you have your layers all stacked, then you're going to want to have one more piece that you're going to use as your tie. And actually, there's 2 ways to do this. You can tie this center piece, but I'm going to put mine on a ring today. So I have this gold ring. It's probably about a 1-inch ring. You can use any size ring. Just remember, if you use a smaller ring, then you will fit less material in. But these are great, these rings are great for tassels. Then it makes it easy to take them on and off of your journal because you can just open up this opening here. All right, so once you've got that, so let's pretend that we had used this. We would just take it, run it under, and tie it. And it would basically do the same exact thing that this would do. You would tie it, and then, actually I'll tie it, but I won't double knot anything. So you would tie it like this, and then you would have more here that you would tie like this. And then that way this would be the hangy part. You could hang it over a doorknob if you wanted to use it as decor. You could put a bulb pin through it, so you could use the bulb pin to hang it on the journal, however you wanted to do it. All right, but for today's purposes, we're going to use this ring. You can also use a lobster claw clasp. I've done that with a lot of my tassels, and they work great. All right, so now we've got our fibers the way we want them. So now we're going to take an extra piece of fabric that we have. This is a puff top tassel, by the way. I'm going to take our extra fabric, or not fabric, but our tie material, our trim, that's what I'm trying to say. And we're going to tie it like that. And I'm not going to double knot it just yet, because you'll notice that there's some looseness here. I don't mind a little bit of looseness, but I don't want it to be too loose. I don't want it to look unfinished. So I'll just take these and just tug on them a little bit. Like I said, I like a little bit of puff, but I just like things to look tidy. All right, now we're going in and we're really going to pull this tight, okay? And put a finger there so it stays. Because it'll get loose because it's fighting against the fibers. It sort of can sort of bounce, you know, and they push our trim out. There we go. All right, so that's been double knotted. I can do a triple just to be sure, but usually a double does the job. Okay, and I just let these hang down, because, you know, I like to add beads and dangles and things. So basically, for your basic tassel, you're almost done. Now what we're going to do now is we're going to trim the bottom. So I'll kind of hold it up, fluff it out, comb it with your fingers, and then lay it back down. There's a couple of ways that you can trim the bottom. Sometimes I gather it like this, and I'll just go trim it like that. But today I'm not going to, because remember, I put the pearls inside, and I don't want to hurt my scissors by coming across one of them in the wrong way. So I'm just going to trim this by hand, and I just start with, you know, just one, pick it up and trim it. I like to trim them at an angle. And let's see how that looks. All right, I'm going to shake it out one more time, and I'm going to look at the other side. There we go. Okay, so when I flipped it over, it was on the other side before, but now I've flipped it over, and you can see there's a few wild ones here. So we're just going to take a minute to trim these up as well. Sometimes one of the fun parts about a tassel, when you've added all these fun fibers, you can look through it and find, you know, it's like a treasure hunt. Especially when we start to add our little pieces of jewelry or buttons, or, you know, all the little things that we like to add. Okay, so this tassel is basically done. Now, if you want to level up, and I always do, I am going to add some stuff. But real quick, as you can see before I do that, I'm just looking for any strands, because, you know, when we tear our fabric, we end up with some strands. So we'll just go through and pull on them or cut them. Let's have a look at the other side for the same. Yeah, there's a few down here. Let's get rid of those. Okay, I think we just about got them. All right, now this tassel is officially ready for goodies. Now, one of the things I like to do is I like to choose which I feel like is the front of the tassel and which I feel like is the back of the tassel. And I just sort of look at it and decide which one I think is prettiest. And this one I think shows more fibers. So I'm going to get rid of this loose fiber here because that's a distraction. But then I think this will be the front of the tassel. Now I've taken a needle And I've taken some thread, and you don't have to do this, of course, but I thought for this tassel I'd go ahead and add some buttons. So I'm going to go ahead and sew these on. Try to make it quick. This is a nice thick thread. It's actually thin waxed thread. Well, at least that's what I think it is. That's what it was sold as. So that's what I think it is. So just real quick, don't have to be crazy about it, just doing the little crossover there. And we'll turn it over on the back. I mean, you guys know how to sew, and you probably know how to do this better than I do. But we're just going to create a double knot. And then I'm going to cut this off. And then this I made long enough so I could just take and knot the end one more time and keep going. Friends, now I am going to add some pearls to the tassel, and you'll see that I am using a needle, and I am pushing the needle through the holes of the pearls and this purple gem, and I'm putting it on the thin pieces of the satin trim that I used in the tassel. I thought it might be fun to take this key and alter it a little bit, so I'm using jewelry cord, and I'm going to tie it here to keep it steady, and then I'm going to add a variety of beads to it and some really small charms. I have a sewing needle, and I have the jewelry cord going through the end of the sewing needle, and then I'm able to use that to wind the beads onto the cord. Now that I have beads on the cord, I'm going to go ahead and start winding this around the key. Now, I would have used copper wire or jewelry wire, but at the time of making this key, I couldn't find mine. I have since found it. My daughter had borrowed it. So I ended up using this sort of softer cord, but it ends up working out perfectly fine. So you can see I'm wrapping it around the key and sort of pushing the beads into place of where I want them. There are a few spots that look a little bit empty, and I don't want to add more beads to it, so I'm going to thread some trim through the cord and then just tie it in a little knot. But this will add some color and take up a little bit of space in those areas that don't have beads. Friends, here is my completed tassel. I love how it turned out. There's so many goodies inside of it. Thanks for watching. See you soon.